Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the Give Yourself Goosebumps series, and it's book number 10, Diary of a Mad Mummy. Now, for starters, I remember reading this book as a kid, but I don't really remember if I outright loved it or anything. I just remember seeing this cover when I got back into collecting, and I was like, I think I've read this book before, and I can remember some positive things tucked away in my memory bank about it. But I definitely needed to reread it. And after rereading it, I have to say that this book made me fall in love with a certain part of it. And what I read in this book will stick with me for the rest of this series. Now, is it perfect? Not quite, and I'll get into that near the end of the video. But if you haven't tried Diary of a Mad Mummy before, I think there's something in here, especially given what we've been given in Goosebumps with the mummy stories in general. I think there's something in here mummy-wise for pretty much everyone to enjoy in some capacity. Whether you think it's decent or good, that's all subjective. But this is one of the highlights of the mummy books in the franchise, I have to say. And if you haven't tried to Give Yourself Goosebumps book before, maybe you're teetering on where to start, what to try. This is a good example of what to expect. It has a lot of the same formatting as most Give Yourself Goosebumps books. The puzzles aren't overly intricate, so you're not being thrown into something hard or with a harder difficulty. This might be a good start for you. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So, in Give Yourself Goosebumps books, you are the main character, and you get to decide the adventure as you go along in the story, right? And in this particular story, you are vacationing in San Francisco, and you are visiting this ginormous skyscraper in the city skyline that houses a ancient Egypt exhibit. And in the exhibit, there's this 4,000-year-old mummy that you're excited to see. Now, you are also accompanied with your family on this vacation trip, and your older brother, I think his name is Jared, and he's 14 years old. And then you have a younger sister, and I forget her name, but she's also there, and she's kind of annoying. And Jared likes to pick on you because you're interested in like ancient mummies and Egyptian history and stuff like that. So while you're at the museum, you have to kind of deal with, your brother nagging you. But as you're walking through the museum and you're looking over at the 4,000-year-old mummy, there is a random movement in the case that catches your eye, and you have to think whether what you saw was real or not. And it's almost simultaneously folded paper with held together by ancient grass is right there next to your feet, and you pick it up and you realize that it's a diary of sorts that go back many years, and the most recent entry is live and in color being written. And you're like, well, how is this being written? And you observe it, and you put two and two together that the diary must be of the dummy that's inside the case. And the mummy can write in the diary with its mind using telepathy, which is a really cool concept. And you're pretty much forced into a crossroads of the story. And this is how many Give Yourself Goosebumps books go. It's very textbook in this regard, but after about the first 4 pages, it throws you into the dividing line of the story, where you go down one path or the other. Now, in this book specifically, I would say that one storyline makes up about 2/3 of the entire book, and the other one is very short, maybe 30 to 40 pages worth of material going down the other arc. The one arc involves, the first option you have involves you taking the diary with you back to your hotel, and then you come back later that night, because in the diary, in the most recent entry, it said that the mummy that was inside the case that you saw is planning to escape that night from the building, and you want to see if this actually happens. And the other arc involves you going down the elevator, which is nearby, and you just go in the elevator immediately, and it takes you on a completely different path in the story. Now, the elevator arc is the shortest arc, so I'll go ahead and touch on this first. So in the elevator arc, you get on this elevator and it takes you down to the basement of this building. And it's really dark down there. You can't see anything. And you don't really have any equipment. This isn't a game book where you pick up equipment in the beginning of the story. I think that could have helped this arc a little bit, but we'll get into that near the end. But you have pretty much two options to go down. You can go up these stairs that lead you to somewhere that you don't know, or try to go down this tunnel. If you try to go down the tunnel, there's a really quick ending, so you're pretty much forced to go up the stairs. And when you get up the stairs, you end up presumably in Egypt somewhere. And you have this diary in hand after you picked it up, and you don't know where you are. And you can't go back down the stairs because there's guards there guarding it and saying that there's no entry, blah, 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 blah. Well, now that you have this diary in Egypt, you're confronted by this Egyptian man and this American man who both want possession of your diary that you have. Now, there's three paths you can take. You can either go with the American, go with the Egyptian guy, or go run away from them. Now, if you run away from them, you end up getting kind of lost, and you're wandering through aimlessly, and you're pretty much I don't know how to put this, but you're pretty much screwed because you don't have food, you don't have water, and you end up stumbling across, essentially, this path takes you to like a movie set near where the pyramids are, and you think you're hearing visions from the Sphinx because you're so dehydrated or hungry or something, and it's actually a movie set, and you get to talk to some stars on there, and get to eat from the tents and make a phone call home, stuff like that. But if you go down the other paths where you could go with the American guy or go with the Egyptian guy, if you go with the American guy, he introduces himself and he wants to buy the diary from you, and he takes you on a camel to towards town where you can sit down with him and get a free cup of lemonade and negotiate price. And if you agree to sell it to him for a certain price, he tells you to come back later and meet him up. And if you do that, you realize that he scammed you. And then the other path with that is that you can try to barter to a higher price. And then he raises the stakes when the lemonade's brought to you. And there's like a drugging metaphor in this for some reason. So I'm not making that up. But yeah, that's there. And if you correctly pick the right path, you end up pretty much on the green there. So that's essentially the American arc in a nutshell. But if you go with the Egyptian guy, he takes you to the ruins of the pharaoh that you have this diary of. And he's not allowed to go in there, and he pretty much dumps you off in there, and you're supposed to go exploring this area by yourself. And one area of the pyramid you will find will take you to this path where you end up at a certain place, and you have this torch that he gave you, and you only have limited time to memorize this path on this map that he gave you, which goes into this arc having the only map function of the whole book. Now, I didn't mention this already, but there is a hieroglyphic function if you go off by yourself, but it's not really much so to even bring up. But here, you have two options to go down. You have to memorize the puzzle on the page, and if you go down the one path, you end up back at the elevator, and you see what's in the elevator, let's just say that. But the other way, you end back up to the building, and you find your brother Jared, and there's a big revelation about Jared's involvement in all this, and how he potentially may have set up this entire thing to just mess with you as a big prank, but there might be a little more to it than that. And that's essentially all you're getting out of the elevator arc. It's a very short one, not a lot to it. It's kind of average. But the next arc I want to talk about is the one I absolutely love. Now, this one is the one where you take the diary back to your hotel, and you come up with this plan to come back to the building late at night. So you go back to your hotel, and you're waiting for your siblings and your parents to go to sleep. And once they fall asleep, you sneak out and you go through the streets of Egypt, or of San Francisco, should I say, by yourself at night, and you end back up at the building and you sneak in, and while you're in there, you notice that there's some people around, but you're trying to remain undetected, and you end up back where the mummy is supposed to be, but you realize that the case is broken, and the mummy looks like he's already made his escape. Meanwhile, you're checking the diary to kind of see if the mummy has, updated it or anything, and by doing that, you end up encountering this mummy. Now, if you choose to help the mummy, it takes you down one path where you get to pretty much use trivia from former mummy books from the original 62, specifically Return of the Mummy, and you get to essentially cast the spell from Return of the Mummy that brought, I think, Koru alive or something, and you get to use that on your friend. But if you do that, it kind of alters time a little bit, and you end up getting rewarded for what you do if you chose to help him. Now, if you choose not to help him, he pretty much grabs you by the neck and tries to do something with you, and you're forced to run away. But when you run away, you realize that the mummy's gone, and you find this trail of bandages that he's tried to take off himself, because he confesses to you that these bandages were given to him when he was alive, and he wasn't really dead when this happened to him, and he needs to have a second chance at life, right? So he's found a way to shed these bandages, and you have the option to pick them up or just try to hide from people that you hear nearby. If you pick up the bandages, this is probably one of the greatest arcs I've come across in Give Yourself Goosebumps, because this is just body horror central, okay? If you pick up these bandages, they slowly start creeping up your body, and you slowly start seeing your skin turn brown and leathery, and your eyes fade into your skull, and it's very descriptive on that. You start to shrink down a little bit and shrivel as your body essentially gets turned into a mummy. And there's a path where, one of my favorite paths, is where the mummy guy takes your identity. Now that he's been freed, he looks like he's starting to heal, and he takes your identity and transforms into what you used to look like, and takes your place, and then he disappears. Now that you're trapped like a mummy, now you have to either choose to deal with these museum workers that are chasing after you, and if you go down that path, I don't want to spoil anything, but that one's kind of dark and fun. A lot of good body horror moments. And then there's another arc where you escape and you try to go get medically helped because you don't know what else to do. And you encounter these doctors that want to look inside of you and give you x-rays and stuff and open you up, and it's really, really creepy. And I really enjoyed that stuff. Not to mention, going back to if you chose to help the mummy guy, there's a really funny arc, more on the comedic side, but it was still hilarious, where you take him to pretty much make him look a little bit younger by taking him to a salon or something, and they give him this treatment, and it shaves off a couple years on how old he looks because he's a mummy. And then the ending involves him leaving you a note in the diary when you get back to your hotel, saying that this guy knows a lot of secrets that I need to know, so I need to follow him around forever. That stuff was hilarious. But the true path to get to your true ending here in the story is that you're a mummy, and you have to, when you escape the museum, you end back up at your hotel with your family, and you go through this whole ordeal to get back into the hotel room, and your family is mortified that you are a mummy. But the problem is that your mummification process has gone along so much that you can't vocalize anything to convince them that this is you, because your vocal cords are mummified now. So you come up with this idea to write a note and try to convince them, and then you try to stare at them, to get them to look at your eyes, but you forget that you don't have eyeballs anymore, and it's kind of emotional, right? It's very hard-hitting stuff with this storyline, because you feel yourself as the main character feeling helpless that you can't do anything about this transformation. This is why I love this storyline so much, because it's very reminiscent to something like The Haunted Mask, when you feel that helplessness of Carly Beth when she can't get that mask off of her face. You feel that utter defeat in you as a character. And you don't know how this is going to get resolved. Well, it turns out that you might have broken through to one of your siblings. And by doing so, you're able to kind of get them to help loosen your bandages, and you manage to trap the mummy guy that's trying to take your place, and you end up turning him back into a mummy. And the true ending of the story involves you pretty much having this diary, and you pretty much make up with your older brother, and you kind of get closer. This arc involves you and your brother a lot. There's some different avenues you can go down where you're both get turned into mummies and stuff. I thought that was kind of neat. And it branches off into many storylines in this, but that's essentially the main storyline there. And that's pretty much as far as I'll go with Diary of a Mad Mummy. Okay, so let's start off with the positives here. For one, I think one of the best arcs in Give Yourself Goosebumps that I've read personally is the arc with you getting the diary and you go back to your hotel room and then you sneak back out and go back into the building. That arc is so well thought out and constructed. Every single ending, even the goofy ones, down this pretty large scale path, because this path is pretty much 2/3 of the book, right? Every ending possible was entertaining in some way, whether it was going for goofy, dark, kind of standard. They all hit very well, right? There's no path in this storyline that was a dud, in my opinion. I dug the emotions to the storyline because it involved you pretty much getting put on the brink of hopelessness as you get turned into a mummy, and you can't vocalize, you know, what you need to vocalize to your family to convince them and stuff. And not only that, you can't convince the doctors that you interact with because you can't talk. You can't talk to the workers that you interact with. It's utter hopelessness. And the concept of putting bandages on you and turning you into a mummy is kind of reminiscent to werewolf skin in some ways, where on a full moon, if you put on the werewolf skin, you get to become a werewolf, right? And it has that werewolf skin, haunted mask flair to it that really pops in my brain. And I'm going to file this storyline away because a lot of the body horror in this was excellent. For a mummy book, it's up there with some stuff I read in Who's Your Mummy from Horrorland. I mean, this was really good stuff. And I was not expecting character growth, like in terms of character relationships with you and your brother Jared in this. And there's also some really fun little side storylines you can go down if you want to like screw over your little sister. And the book kind of breaks the fourth wall with you when you make really like bad moral decisions. And like I said, it just makes it not only a fun time, but it's actually intriguing to read what's going on. You know, most of the time with Give Yourself Goosebumps, you're just having fun with the action in the story. You're having fun with the gameplay. While this storyline doesn't have gameplay to it, minus maybe one coin flip function to it, which I guess some of these earlier foil books had more than the Black Spines did. But aside from that, it really carried its own on the story department, and I was really impressed by that. And after reading that, I was like, man, I think that this book has potential to become a 5-star book. I have literally no complaints about that arc. All of my complaints about this book go to the elevator arc, which I think is at best average. It doesn't do anything offensive per se. I don't think there's really any bad endings. Some were kind of less than stellar, but nothing outright bad. The problem with the elevator arc is that in terms of this story, right, these books are generally like 136 pages, give or take. I would say that first arc is majority of the book, probably like 100 pages. Maybe, give or take 10, maybe like closer to 90. I would ballpark the second arc and the elevator arc is maybe at tops 30 to 40 pages. Okay, maybe 45 at the height. It's a very short one, and all the stuff in it feels generic, like the stuff you would read in Return of the Mummy, and all of that. It does have a cool little map function. It's not the most difficult thing ever. I think 5-year-olds could figure it out, because you only have 2 options, and the smiley face function with the hieroglyphics, you'll know what I'm talking about when you get to that point. That was a cool little function if they actually made the hieroglyphics a little bit challenging and made it to where you needed to decipher them correctly on different pages than just one. But if it had a better gameplay function to it, it could have helped it. But in terms of story, it comes off like filler to the other half of the book. I mean, none of this stuff really matters. And I guess in this arc, the true ending you get is one of those, it was a prank bro endings. And while it isn't just that, it just kind of sours my opinion on this second arc a little bit. And, thinking back to the arc I love in this book, that actually used trivia from former books, right? If you use trivia to help the mummy and stuff, I thought that was neat, right? This book had so much potential to be great. I feel like if it had more trivia and nods to former mummy stuff, I mean, there was nods to films in this. Like, if you knew film trivia, which is kind of weird, too, now that I'm thinking about it. But I just wish that there was more trivia to the former books, because I think that was a cool angle in this, and this would have been the prime example to do it with. You could have done like Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Return of the Mummy and stuff like that more. And for the potential of the gameplay function, I'm going to kind of pull something that I saw in another Give Yourself Goosebumps book, where I think it would have been fun if you got to enter certain rooms of the pyramid and explore the pyramid more, and got to use the hieroglyphs, and that unlocked like a puzzle or something. Especially in the pyramid arc, because it was kind of bland. And if it had that, I think I would give this book a 5 out of 5 and pretty much put a gold stamp on this and say that this is one of the best GYG books, but it just didn't have that. And because I love one storyline outright and think it's perfect, and the other one is very flawed, I had to kind of balance it out. So when I went to try to rate this thing from a 0 to 5 stars, I was like teetering between like a 4.3 and a 4.5, because if I'm being honest, that pyramid arc is average. So I'd give it about like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. But the other one's like a 5 out of 5. So trying to balance it out, it ends up like a 4.2, 4.3 range. But I'm willing to give it bonus points to give it an A- and give this a 4.5 out of 5. And that's where I'm at with this book. I give it an A-. I think this is a great Give Yourself Goosebumps book for what it is. It's not the best one, and I can see people kind of scratching their heads that I gave it this high of a rating, but for me personally, that one arc was fantastic, and I had to give it credit. Now, I just, even if I wanted to give it more points, I can't, because other Give Yourself Goosebumps books have better gameplay, have more balanced arcs to them, in my opinion, and this one is just kind of lopsided. But it still gets a recommend from me. If you haven't read Diary of a Mad Mummy before, please go try it out and let me know what you think. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Diary of a Mad Mummy. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.